Greetings. The title of our presentation is Hosting the Platform for Experimental Collaborative Ethnography, PECE. And we are the PECE Design Group with Kim Fortune and Mike Fortune at the University of California, Irvine, Lindsay Poirier, Allie Morgan, Brian Callahan, and Brandon Costello-Kuhn at RPI in New York, Allison Kenner at Drexel University in Philadelphia, Brad Fiddler at Stevens Institute of Technology in New Jersey, and Alok Khandekar at Indian Institute of Technology, Hyderabad. PECE is a digital research environment that we've built along with software engineers, also distributed around the world. PECE both supports collaboration and in itself depends on extensive collaboration. PECE both supports new forms of ethnographic research and expression and is itself an ethnographic field site and text. PECE has become a complicated technology project as well as an ethnographic research project in its own right. So PECE is something we built and something we study. It's also something meant to be shared. So in what follows, you can consider possibilities for your own PECE projects. We'll walk you through the site in the mode of an open house, pointing in conclusion to theoretical insight we've developed on ways experimental digital space needs to be hosted, in the manner Derrida elaborated in his writing about hospitality, needing to structure and set the stage for collaborative encounters without over-determining how such encounters play out. The image of a glass bowl is illustrative, suggesting how just a little structure, what we've come to call light structure, creates space for collaboration, rather like creating a space for play with Winnicott. Imagine, for example, how the structure shown here, the outline of a bowl, could be elaborated. The bowl itself could be filled in with expected or unexpected content. There could be material both inside and outside the bowl. There could be bowls within bowls, providing lightly structured space to work, alone or together. PECE is made up of many such light structures. We'll walk you through some of them here. PECE is an intensely customized open source content management system designed to support new forms of collaboration among researchers across time and space and new ways of drawing users into ethnographic research. Here you can see where it can be downloaded at GitHub, an open software development platform. As seen here, the logos for many PECE projects play off the image of a kaleidoscope, which, like PECE, allows users to bring things together in different ways, easily shifting relationships and the overall configurations. Kaleidoscopes work with bits of glass. PECE works with bits of ethnographic data and interpretation, assembled and layered in different ways, experimenting with ethnographic analysis, interpretation, and expression. PECE was first built to support the ASMA files, a collaborative ethnographic study of the cultural dimensions of environmental health science and politics. PECE now also supports an array of other projects, both extensive and delimited, including the Disaster STS Network, a class titled Gender and History, and a Japanese science oral history collection. PECE supports diverse projects and is designed for this, but this doesn't mean that its design is unstyled or neutral. To the contrary, we have purposely encoded theoretical commitments into PECE, commitments to post-structural ideas about how language moves and meaning is made, to Gregory Bateson's ideas about cross-scale communication, to surrealist tactics of juxtaposition, and so on. We've articulated these as design logics, which travel with all instances of the platform. So you can look at these in more detail on any instance of PECE. We think of the architecture of PECE as a triptych with space for archiving, analysis, and crafted expression of ethnographic insight. Importantly, the middle space for collaborative analysis is where we've focused and invested most. Here especially is where what we've called collaborative hermeneutics is being worked out. Our focus on the middle of the ethnographic process is one way PECE is different from many other digital platforms that support cultural analysis. Some platforms are, first and foremost, designed to archive, providing a stable place for material, oral history or ethnographic interviews, for example. Other platforms are designed to support new modes of publication, often multimodal, integrating film clips and audio recordings into the text that interprets them, for example. PECE also supports archiving and publication, and these two have become places for experimentation. But the middle space has been our dominant in the sense used by linguist Roman Jakobson to describe how particular tropes, especially metaphor and metonymy, drive and order a text even as other tropes remain in play. In PECE, the middle space is dominant because this is where collaborative analysis, comparison, data reuse, and preliminary visualization happens. It is where we work with each other and with the material in the platform. PECE is also distinctive because it was first imagined, designed, and remains bound to particular kinds of ethnographic projects, operating at the nexus of anthropology and science and technology studies. Projects especially concerned with phenomena involving tangles of scales, from the nano to the micro, meso, macro, meta, and deutero, and systems, ecological, biochemical, social, political, economic, and cultural, thus calling for especially complex accounting and accountability, often beyond what established systems can support, thus the foregrounding of the experimental. Though deeply informed by thinking about experimentalism in both the arts and sciences, PECE's experimental commitments are ethnographically based. We reach for new knowledge practices, expressions, and circulations because we study phenomena that call for this with deep urgency. The image you see here is an analytic structure for a research project that has shaped what PECE has become. The urgency of PECE projects, the call to research, is articulated in what we've called substantive logics, which are different for every PECE project and even for sub-projects. Here, for example, you see the substantive logics articulated by Lindsay Poirier for a class she taught on the Asmaphiles platform titled Critical Data Analysis. Substantive logics are reasons, theoretical, practical, and political, for investing in a given project. Such logics often multiply as a project matures, and different collaborators bring different logics to a project, pluralizing how a project makes sense. Technically and conceptually supporting articulation of substantive logics in PECE projects is one of a number of ways PECE supports knowledge pluralism and kaleidoscopics. PECE also supports knowledge pluralism and kaleidoscopics by providing space for many projects on any instance of the platform, projects which can nest and overlap or remain relatively distinct. This is enabled by an architecture built around groups. Groups can be public or private with open or closed memberships. Materials produced by or associated with one group can be easily shared with other groups. A first move groups often make is to build a shared bibliography, which is done outside PECE using Zotero bibliographic software. Every few hours, Zotero entries are ported over to the PECE instance with which it is associated and then can become a PECE artifact. Interconnecting with Zotero allows us to leverage Zotero's sophisticated bibliography formatting functionality, which the bibliography tool within PECE doesn't yet have. Zotero is also open source and free to use. Another early move by PECE users is to upload artifacts, images, PDFs, audio or video files, adding metadata that describes the context in which the artifact was found or created, media format, and so on. Importantly, there is also a field for critical commentary, where a user is asked to explain why the artifact is relevant to the project it was collected for. This commentary is important to other possible users of the artifact while helping justify fair use per U.S. copyright law, which allows for use of copyright material for criticism, teaching, and research without need for permission from the copyright holder. Importantly, the metadata associated with PECE artifacts document how ethnographic data is analytically made, not merely collected, exposing one of many analytic moments in an ethnographic workflow. Metadata done right helps members of a research group find data and better understand the context in which it was produced and contributed by another member of the group. This quickly becomes important in collaborative ethnography, which easily generates hundreds, if not thousands, of artifacts. Metadata is even more important if data is to be discoverable and usable beyond a research group that produces it. For the PECE design group, this is a deeply experimental investment. We can't well imagine how the data produced for the Asmaphiles and other PECE projects will be useful in other projects. And this is the point, in part, challenging us to figure out ways to make metadata we produce discoverable and relevant to projects other than those that come readily to mind. The double bind at the heart of this is what makes it interesting and experimental. Not knowing how to do what we propose is what puts us, literally and figuratively, on edge. The seemingly innocuous metadata fields that should be filled in for artifacts added to a PECE platform are thus critically important, enlivening the data so that it can have many lives. The fields PECE users are asked to complete follow the recommendations of the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative, considered by many to be best practice, though there are sustained debates about how metadata for research data should best be configured. Our own experience and analysis has certainly confirmed that metadata is far from straightforward. For anthropologists, at least, we need metadata on metadata on metadata, what we have come to think of as highly textured metadata. An archive recorded interview, for example, should of course include the information expected by Dublin Core, but it also should include much more background and contextual information, a description of the project within which the interview was collected, planned interview questions, even if not closely followed, details on the intellectual genealogies and political pressures that shape the project and its data collection, and so on. PECE provides space for this. Further analysis from many angles can be done using PECE analytic structures, which scaffold analysis at different points in the research process. Some structures, sets of questions for interviewing differently positioned social actors, for example, help a researcher produce data. Other analytic structures scaffold researchers individually or collaboratively as they analyze and interpret an interview, found document, image, or other artifact. Still, other analytic structures guide data integration, helping researchers pull from many sources to profile a person, organization, or place, for example. Importantly, any user can add questions to the question sets that make up an analytic structure. These structures are in turn archived as both data themselves and as additional textured metadata for the artifacts they are attached to. Here you see an analytic structure for reading a climate policy for a city, region, or state. This type of analytic really queries the artifact itself, in this case, an archived climate policy document. This analytic guides a user through what we call data ethnography, searching for data because the data itself is relevant to the project, but also because the search helps us understand the data infrastructure and culture of a particular place. This analytic is integrative, asking a user to pull in information and interpretation from diverse sources about the governance style of a city, for example, or about an organization's history, mission, and practice. In any project, PECE analytic structures easily multiply, exposing quite routine moments in an ethnographic workflow that usually go unmarked. They also allow researchers to collaborate in the process of, rather than at the end of interpretation. And they continually decenter the data and project, allowing researchers to easily develop new angles on what they study, new questions, and new relations to other researchers. This drift is not only tolerated, but encouraged, animating the platform as a whole. PECE's analytic structures are where collaborative hermeneutics really play out. It is where the process of collaboration and explanatory pluralism is really put to the test. Importantly, many people can analyze the same PECE artifact, seeing other people's responses as they work. All responses to a particular question, whatever the artifacts they are attached to, can also be viewed together. So collaboration is ongoing and in many places. The questions structure but don't overdetermine where the interpretation can go as unstructured free text. The process is very different than coding. PECE's photo essays are also a way to share interpretations as they develop, though they can also be crafted as final products. Photo essays are made up of image artifacts in the platform, all with fairly extensive metadata. Text associated with each image contextualizes and interprets the image. Readers of a photo essay have space to comment, and that is archived with the essay. The photo essay you see here collects visualizations of Indian air pollution produced by different organizations, the World Health Organization, Indian newspapers, etc. We have collected these kinds of visualizations across all 11 cities we are working in, tracking the uneven informating of environmental politics. This photo essay collects images that point to reasons air pollution resists legibility in Philadelphia, because of the promise of reindustrialization in step with the shale gas boom, for example, and because other problems like the opioid crisis are so consuming. Finally, this is a PECE collage essay, our most extensive experiment with a new form for ethnographic expression. A PECE collage essay consists of a shadow box-like web page cut into any number of spaces, which can include and juxtapose images, short or long segments of text, found or original video or audio clips of interviews, scientific articles, website snapshots, field notes, and so on. The extent of metadata can vary and can change over time. PECE's collage essays support multimodal ethnographic expression kaleidoscopically. Stable elements can be juxtaposed and then be rearranged or changed out for new material. PECE collage essays can also provide access to the research data behind interpretations and arguments, as is increasingly expected in many research fields. Importantly, providing such access helps validate anthropological claims, even if reproducibility is not the ideal. Even more important is the way sharing research data allows users to deepen and add to existing interpretations, realizing collaborative hermeneutics. Here you see an essay focused on the hygiene hypothesis as a form of asthma knowledge, and here an essay about PECE itself. We are still learning how to leverage PECE collage essays as a genre form, and have just begun to share them beyond the community of people actively using PECE and experimenting with its possibilities. But the experiment is enlivening, generating as many questions as it answers, helping keep PECE writ large an experimental venture. To conclude, I'll return to the challenge and call to experimentalism in anthropology and to the special challenge of hosting digital experimentalism. We work on PECE aware of long-standing effort, often experimental in tenor, to integrate new technologies and media into the work and expression of cultural analysis. Gregory Bateson and Margaret Means studying work with photography as both a research tool and means of conveying their analysis comes immediately to mind. The history of filmmaking and the conduct and expression of cultural analysis has also laid important ground, generating impressive methodological debates and innovation, and a body of work that literally provides different angles on matters of interest and concern. Digital technologies and media still other possibilities. Importantly, digital media has a unique dimension that we need to learn to leverage. Designed accordingly, digital media can not only be read differently in the literary manner demonstrated and celebrated by theorists like Shoshana Fellman, but also can be continuously refigured through use. This capacity to be unsettled from within is not a given, however. Much digital media, we have learned, are literally and figuratively hard-coded, forcefully over-determining what happens within their spaces. Designing digital media otherwise thus takes research and what Lindsay Poirier has called tricks and devious design. Experimental digital media thus requires structure, but not too much structure, strict avoidance of systematicity, alongside durable attention to how things come together. Hosting PECE is thus mediated by a deep paradox. Our aim is to support collaborative ethnographic knowledge production that isn't overdetermined by our own present sense of what is needed and possible. But neither underdetermination or collaboration, coming together across difference, happen naturally or easily, both depending on well-conceived structure, elaborate scaffolding, and creative experimentation. In building PECE, we thus need to structure ethnographic work in order to unstructure it. This is the paradox of hosting PECE. Derrida's writing on hospitality thus offers a compelling way of thinking about what hosting experimental digital media entails. Derrida points to the aporia and paradox in how hospitality requires one to be the master of the house or nation, a controlling agent who sets the table and stage for encounters with foreigners and foreignness. To be hospitable, one has to have the power to host. One has to exercise control over the space. One must also, however, give up mastery, ownership, one's possessions, if the foreigner is really to come in, if hospitality is to be realized. Experimental digital media requires this kind of hosting, structures that create shared spaces, places at the table, light enough to be elaborated and transformed by the encounter. PECE pursues this by design, experimenting with ethnographic experimentation itself. Thank you.